Welcome to the Johnny Gets Cash YouTube channel. This is Chop to the Top, the series where I'm trading my way up from a cheap car to a supercar. At the start of the last episode, you saw me begin with a budget of over £31,000, and I went out and I bought something I've always wanted, a Bentley GT. Now that car is not currently for sale because I'm still running around in it. So what I decided to do was use some of the leftover budget to buy another car in order to keep the trading process going. And I went and bought a beautiful Subaru Forester. Now, as always, let's go through the costs on the Forester at the start of this episode so we can tot up the figures and you know exactly where I stand at the beginning of this episode. So as mentioned, the Bentley is not for sale at the moment, so for now and for the purposes of this video, we're just going to ignore that. I will go into details of the cost of the Bentley and everything that's cost to fix it and get it ready when the time comes. But for now, let's just talk about the Subaru Forester. So let's break the costs down. The Forester itself cost me £1,208.40 to buy in the first place. A timing belt kit and fitting that timing belt, that cost £414. The MOT fee for that car was £45. A new back box was £103.32. Servicing consumables came to £50. And in the case of the Forester, advertising was free via a popular social media platform. That means in total I spent £612.32 on the Forester. Combined with the original purchase price of £1,208.40, the Forester stood me in a total of £1,820.72, leaving £29,196.87 in the kitty. Now of course that's minus the cost of the Bentley. As I've said, we will go into the cost on the Bentley when it's sold, but for now, let's just ignore that because I'm still running that as my own car. Needless to say, there was still money left over in the pot after buying the Bentley and the Forester and all the costs on the Forester, so I haven't gone over or anything like that. But for the purposes of this video, there was £29,196.87 left in the kitty. Unsurprisingly for the Forester, because it was such a lovely example by the time I'd finished with it, it sold to the first person who came to see it, and it sold for full money, which was £3,995. So if we combine that £3,995 with the remaining kitty of £29,196.87, that means the total moving into this episode today is £33,191.87. So let's go and take a look at what I've bought to hopefully keep making money and keep the process moving forward. So here it is, guys, this is what I've bought. It is a 2006 Toyota Land Cruiser. Now this is an LC120. Some people call them a Prado, some people refer to them as a Colorado. Either way, it's not the biggest Land Cruiser, the Amazon, as you've seen earlier in this series. This is a slightly smaller one. This has got a 3-litre D4D, so not the 4.2 straight 6 you saw in the Amazon, a slightly smaller, more eco-friendly, fuel-efficient engine on a slightly smaller chassis. But that's not to say this is any less of a proper Toyota. This is the LC5 version, so it's the absolute top spec that you could have got in this body shape. I'll walk you around it now and show you what we're dealing with. Obviously finished in black, looks really, really smart. Now this car has done 162,000 miles, I think it is, and it is a 2006 car, so that makes it 18 years old. So it's done its work, but as you know, these things will go around the world multiple times if you look after them, and this one is no different, although I'm going to give it an absolute full service, including going through the gearbox to make sure it's ready for the new owner. Externally, it's okay. It's got a few little marks, namely there is a little flake of paint missing on the bonnet just here, and there are a few little brushes down the side. Let's have a look. It's over here. There's a bit of a scratch on that arch, and there's been some previous work done to this arch here, and also the rear bumper corner. Not ideal, but it's all things that I can deal with. Inside it's remarkably straight. It's all original and very, very smart. Now when I bought it, it had these seat covers fitted, and I wasn't sure if it meant that the seats had never been sat on properly or if they was covering damage. Now passenger side, as you'd imagine, he's in lovely condition, but the driver's side has got a split, but we'll get to that in a minute. Now, it drives absolutely beautifully. Automatic gearbox in this one with high and low ranges. Everything works, including the adjustable air suspension, which is a real boon. I said just now it's the LC5, so it's the top version. You've got the touch screen, you've got climate control, you've got sunroof, you've got everything you need in this vehicle. So the plan for this one is to make it as good as possible, put a fresh MOT on it, and hopefully get it sold quickly. I don't need to do too much to it in terms of restoration or modification or anything like that. So first things first, let's get it in, let's get it on the ramp, make sure it's all good underneath, then we'll get it all cleaned up, see if it needs anything for MOT, put it in for test, make sure it passes, and then really give it a really good detail, make it look as bright as possible, and see what we can fetch in the open market. Okay, Land Cruiser is on the ramp, and on first inspection, I've got to say, I don't think I've done too badly here. Remember, this is an old Toyota, okay, so I was kind of expecting to see some rot that I had to sort out under here, or at the very least, some repairs that maybe needed tidying up and making a little bit better, perhaps. But at the moment, all I'm seeing is completely original sills, yes, with a little bit of surface corrosion pretty much on everything, but nothing penetrative. So I'm actually really pleased, I think, because although this is quite a big job, what I think I've got to do is just brush everything back, which will get off any bits of dirt and loose rust and stuff, and that will show me for sure that there's no welding needed. But assuming there's not, and at the moment I really don't think there is any welding needed, all I have to do from that stage is chemically treat everything to make sure it's sound, and then protect it so it looks sound as well as being actually sound. So safe to assume this car's never had a lick of treatment underneath it, looking at everything here. But as I said just now, it's really all just surface corrosion. There's nothing I can see that's going to really upset the MOT tester. So it's a very long job for me sorting this out. I think what I'll do first is pretty much the same as what you saw in the last episode, actually. Brush everything back just to make sure it's all clear. Then I'll go around with a wire brush this time and just really rough things up, and then I'll get on with the chemical treatment, etc. So I'll try not to bore you too much. I'll do as much of this in time lapse as I can, and we'll see what we're left with afterwards. But yeah, so far really pleased. It looks like it's going to be a bit of a graft to get it looking shiny, but it's worth doing, isn't it? It's a Land Cruiser. Okay, that is the underside of the Hilux now descaled, all the rust gone, all the loose dirt gone, back to where I need it to be before I can put the treatment on. That is how much dirt, rust and rubbish has come off. It's hard to tell from this shot, but there's about a kilo's worth of rubbish there. So good news, it still doesn't look great under here, but the next stage for me is to bang some treatment on there, get everything protected, and then make it look a little bit better. So I'll either time lapse that or I'll show you when it's done, because I'm sure it's pretty boring watching me go through the underside of a rusty chassis like this. So stay tuned for the finished shots. Okay, that was some bit of graft, but the underside of the Land Cruiser is now finished. So let me show you around it quickly. Basically, everything's been chemically treated and then had stone chip put over the top of it. This is Gravitex I've used here. You've seen me use that on several projects if you've been watching the channel for a while. But just to show you how good everything looks, as I said before, this has never been welded, so everything's totally straight. Now this stone chip is still a little bit wet, so it kind of looks a little bit shinier than it will be. But everything, right down to the rear axle, all the floors, all the chassis, everything that was worked on is now protected, and it just looks that much better under here. Fortunately, I didn't run into anything that needed welding. I was pretty confident I wouldn't, but you never know with these things. But at the moment, this is how it looks. So basically what I've got to do now is get this thing MOT'd, but before I do that, I'm going to continue trying to find a seat base for this car. If I can't, I'll just go ahead and get the MOT done. The reason I'm doing it in that order is I don't really want to get the MOT done and then have it sitting around here for another week or two while I'm trying to find a seat base, with the MOT getting shorter and shorter. So basically that's why I'm delaying that. But if I can't find one in the next few days, I will be chucking this in for MOT, seeing if it's got any advisories that need work, and then going from there. Anyway, that is that stage done. I didn't time lapse it because it was just one of those jobs where you just want to get stuck in and get it done. So forgive me for not showing you the process, but you have seen me do it loads of times before if you've watched this channel before. So now next thing to do is the arches. I suppose that's not going to be done until the car's a bit lower, but stay tuned and I'll show you what I get up to next. So that was a little bit tricky trying to film the arches being cleaned. Now, despite this car being cleaned before, I did get quite a lot of rubbish out of the arches. You can see how much mud and dirt hides in the returns behind these big fat arches. In this case, totally clear. As you can see here, all the chassis and all components look good. I'm not going to go ahead and stone chip this part of the arch because this is actually protected already. There's no damage to it, there's no welding needed or anything like that, and I think personally if I stone chip absolutely everything, it can look a little bit false and a bit like you're trying to hide something. So I tend to only protect the bits that I've been through and scraped and cleared off, like the chassis. So while these arch tubs are in such good nick, I've left them with the original factory chip sealer on there. Within 5 minutes of driving this thing, it'll be covered in mud anyway, but that's just why it looks like that. So a little bit of a change of plans. I'm not actually going to send this for MOT straight away. I'm going to send this out for its service. As mentioned briefly earlier, this is having a really in-depth service, so full engine service, including full timing belt kit. It's also having a gearbox service. I'm going to have the guys go through it entirely because I don't have a huge amount of service history with this vehicle, so I want to make sure everything is as good as I can possibly be sure it is. So that's what's going to happen now. I'm going to chuck the wheels back on this thing, send it out. The next thing you'll see after that is it coming back after the service, at which point I will hopefully have a solution for that damaged seat base and also be sending it in for its MOT test. So that's what's going to happen now. Wheels on, ship it out. So over a week later, the Land Cruiser is back and it's had its entire service done, and that includes a gearbox service with flush, new filters, everything. As I said before, I wanted this to be absolutely done properly. Now you'll notice the truck is filthy at the moment. That's because, as I say, it's been away for over a week, and driving it back from the place where it gets its services done, it's pretty muddy, especially at this time of year, so that's why it's disgusting. I will be dealing with that before the end of this episode, of course, but what I want to show you is the interior. That's really what I want to crack on with. Nothing too horrendous in here, but it is all pretty dirty. All the little bits of rubbish and pieces that came in the car when I bought it are still here. So I want to get on and sort the interior of this Land Cruiser out, making it as nice as possible before I finally get on with making the outside look as good as this thing actually now runs. So that's the next thing I'm going to do, crack on with the interior clean. Okay, so the interior clean of the Land Cruiser is now done and everything's looking a lot better and it smells really, really fresh in here. You'll notice I took the front seat covers off, which brings me to my next point, that driver's seat base. So I mentioned when I bought this Land Cruiser that the seat covers were going to get changed either for proper tailored seat covers, or if I could find a suitable replacement seat base, I wouldn't need seat covers because I could sort all this out. Well, unfortunately, I've searched high and low and I can't find anyone who does a replacement seat base cover for this Land Cruiser LC5. I can find the bases for an Amazon, but not for this style of Land Cruiser. So that led me down the route of looking for proper tailored seat covers, not dissimilar to what I did in that VW Transporter a little while ago. But unfortunately, again, I can't find proper tailored seat covers for this car, so there's a little bit of a mix-up. So being that the seat covers that were fitted in here are quite good quality, albeit generic, I'm going to clean those up and refit those as soon as everything's dried out thoroughly here. So bit of a disappointment I can't change the seat base and do this properly, but that's just unfortunately the hand I've been dealt. So the seat covers that were in this car are going to go back in here once they've been cleaned and everything is dried. So although the interior jobs are now finished on the Land Cruiser, the outside is still looking pretty gross. So I'm going to go out and give this a quick clean off before giving it a full detail towards the end of this video, but I won't show you the quick clean because it's pretty boring. What I do want to get onto though is a little bit of bodywork. Once this thing's clean, I can crack on, but just to give you an idea of what I'm dealing with, there is a poor previous repair here, so I'm going to make that better. A couple of little bits around the vehicle like that. There's a scratch on this arch cover here, but the main one is this flake missing from the bonnet itself. Now it looks like that's just bubbled and flaked at some point, so I don't know if this has had a respray on the bonnet in the past. If so, it's a very, very good one, but there's obviously been a reaction issue here and it's flaked off, so it's not going to be the easiest thing to repair in an invisible manner, but I think whatever I can get done is going to be better than having that big flake missing with the primer showing. So those are the bodywork jobs I need to get on with. So I'm going to give this thing a really quick clean, dry it off, then I'm going to crack on with those bits of paint. I'll show you that. And as I said, once that's all thoroughly gone off, I will give the thing a detail, and then I think it will be time to send it in for its MOT and it will be ready to go. Okay, so the Land Cruiser is all cleaned up, so it's time to walk around and just check in and make sure I know where all these little repairs are that are needed. This is the one I showed you earlier. Bit of a previous repair on this arch. It doesn't look great, so I'll mark that up with a little bit of tape and come back to that. Down this side seems to be okay, apart from this arch. Again, I mentioned that earlier, so we'll just mark that, although it's pretty obvious. The big one, again, you've seen this. Come back to that. Everything down this side looks okay, to be honest. Having given it a clean up, I'm being really critical. I think there's a little bit of clear just missing from there, so I'll mark that and come back to it as well. But realistically, I don't think that's too bad for a 4x4 of this age. So on with paint. I think all these repairs are small enough for me to use my airbrush. Arguably this one is the biggest area of damage, but I still think I can get a fairly satisfactory blend with my airbrush. Obviously I'll mask to the top of the bulbous arch here and I'll lose it downwards. So I'm going to load up the airbrush and show you as quickly as I can how I do this. It'll probably be done in time lapse because it's going to take me probably a few hours to get all these little bits done, but I don't want to bore you to death, so I'll do it as quickly as I can on a time lapse, and I'll show you these spots afterwards when they're all finished, and we can perhaps overlay the footage. You can see what it did look like and what it looks like when it's done. So I finished all the little paint repairs on the Land Cruiser, and now I need to refit the seat covers. As I mentioned before, I've been unable to source a new base for that seat or even any proper tailored covers for these. So what I've done is clean the nice heavy duty seat covers that were on it before, and they are going to get refitted. Now these are okay, these seats, but I think it's worth selling it with the seat covers because chances are this car is going to go to someone who's going to want to tow with it or work with it. So to have seat covers is probably useful anyway. Of course, I will explain about that small amount of damage in the advert, but for now, let's chuck the seat covers back on, put the floor mats back in, and then do a few final touches like glossing the dash up, and then it'll be ready to send this thing off for its MOT. So that is the Land Cruiser now back from MOT, and I'm pleased to say it passed. It passed with a few advisories just on the tyres. So basically all 4 tyres have been advised as being legal but close to the limit. So I think they've got probably a couple of thousand miles left in them. Now normally I'd go ahead and change the tyres straight away so it's a non-advisory MOT. I would also have cleaned this thing after its MOT. Of course, I've done neither of those things, and the reason for that is I have got someone on this vehicle already. I can't say I'm that surprised. Being a Toyota Land Cruiser in this part of the world at this time of year, it was always going to be in demand. But I'll show you around it quickly. But as I say, it hasn't been cleaned since driving back from MOT, and I haven't done those tyres yet. Now, the person who's coming to see the truck is aware I haven't done the tyres. I've reflected the advisory on the tyres in the price of the vehicle, and I'm hoping that will be enough to keep them on board. But just to show you around it quickly, all the bits of paint that have been done, you've seen all of that. The interior, unfortunately, I couldn't change that seat base, so I've had to refit these covers because once again, I couldn't find tailored seat covers. So these do look a little baggy, a little big because they're generic, but they are in good nick, they're not ripped, and I have cleaned them all properly. It smells lovely in here. This thing is ready to work. This was never going to go to someone who wanted a brand new example. I think this was always going to go to someone who wanted a work truck, just wanted the Toyota reliability. So having things like heavy duty seat covers fitted is probably going to be an advantage. Anyway, there's not too much to talk about on the outside. It was really just those bits of bodywork you saw me do. The car drives absolutely fantastically, but since having that service done, I'm absolutely confident it will continue to do so for a long time. You'll notice I've taken the rear spare wheel cover off, the solid cover. That's because the spare wheel is in brand new condition, as is the tyre, and I wanted to show that off when I demonstrate the car. The hard cover will be coming with the car, but I've left it not fitted for now just to demonstrate how good that is. Obviously, you've seen the underside has all been dealt with. That's a really important part of these old Japanese trucks, make sure everything is solid. This one is absolutely as solid as the day it left the factory, and it's had that fresh coat of stone chip. So all around, it is ready to rock. Moving into the back of the car, it's exactly as I showed before, but just a little bit cleaner. You saw me steam everything, so once again, it smells absolutely fantastic in here. It's about as good as you can hope to get an 18-year-old vehicle with 160 odd thousand miles on it. Anyway, I'm going to stop recording now for a little while because I do have that person coming to see this Land Cruiser very shortly. So once I've done that viewing, I'll catch up with you then. Okay, you're joining me a few days later, and I did do that viewing on the Land Cruiser, and as you can probably tell, it has been for a test drive in less than ideal conditions. Now, the Land Cruiser did not sell. Why didn't it sell? Well, it did perform absolutely beautifully. It did everything I said it would do, but the person did not want it. And the reason they didn't want it is because of this, the big hole in the roof. No, not because it's got a sunroof, but because they tried to use the sunroof and they actually got it stuck in the open position. Now, if you're watching this and you're like me and you deal with older vehicles, you're probably familiar with the same sort of behavior patterns that I am. We check as much as we can, but when a sunroof comes on an old car, generally you kind of ignore it. If it's stayed shut and it's not leaking, it's best to leave it that way. I normally test these things, but on this Land Cruiser, I had so many other little bits and pieces to do, I didn't check the sunroof. So probably my fault, but in fairness, if I was going to look at a car of this age, I wouldn't even touch the sunroof. But that said, when someone comes to look at a car, they want to check every knob, switch and button. They want to check every single thing works. And in this case, the person wanted to check the sunroof works, so fair enough, I can't whinge too much. It slid back, no problem, made a clunk noise, and now it will not come forward. It kind of tries to, but it gets stuck immediately. So my job today is to fix that sunroof, because I'm not happy re-advertising this vehicle until I know that that fault is sorted. So that's what I'm going to be working on right now, sorting out the dodgy sunroof. There was some mention of this rear window not working as well. Now, when I last used the vehicle, I checked all the windows and everything obviously before the MOT, and it all worked. So I don't know what's happened there. I need to check that, make sure it's not a switch or a fuse or something silly, but really priority number one is sorting out why that sunroof is stuck wide open. So this is the situation. If I try and operate the sunroof, you'll hear it try and then give up. Now, I don't want to do it too many times because it's going to damage the motor, so I need to take things apart and have a look and see what's going on. Okay, so you're joining me a little bit later. The headliner is down and the sunroof is out. So I've got a big gaping hole up there and I've got the whole sunroof mechanism out. And as you can probably imagine, that was every bit as painful as you might think. At the moment, I'm looking at this thing, trying to figure out what has caused the issue. Why is it not moving? Nothing that obvious at the moment. The only thing I can see is that, as I originally suspected, the sunroof is kind of askew on its tracks. It's not completely square. Now, everything measures up apart from one thing. If I get my tape measure, I can show you. There's this little sort of carriage here. Now, as you can see on this side, the left side, from the edge of the aluminium extrusion to that carriage is 60mm. On this side, that carriage is right up inside here, and if I sort of get it roughly what that is, it's about 100mm from the edge, so they're clearly not square. What I need to figure out to sort that, I believe, is to try and understand how to release these riders, if you can call them that, in these rails, and make them square again. That's what I'm working on at the moment. I don't have the solution at this minute, so I'm not going to do a lot of filming until I figure it out, but I'll bring you back as soon as I'm a bit further down the line. Okay, so we're a few minutes later. Here's what I've done. I think I'm getting somewhere now. I've removed this kind of drip tray, spoilery type thing from the back of the arrangement. What that has done, it's revealed these two carriage things I was talking about. There's one, there's the other, and now you can really see how much closer this one is to the edge of the extrusion as opposed to that one. But what I'm realizing is there's this kind of notch that this kind of locks into, and what has happened as this sunroof has been pushed back. Now, I will say, when the person was inspecting this vehicle, I was looking at the engine with one of the people, and someone else inside the car was testing the switches and whatnot, and they were doing the sunroof, and I thought I heard some sort of strained clicking from something inside. Now, I realized that was probably the sunroof motor struggling its way back. Anyway, what has happened is, due to probably poor lubrication, this is probably original grease and things in here. The car's a 2006, it's like 18 years old, so probably needs a bit of lubrication. What's happened is these carriages come back and they kind of click into these little notches. Now, what happens is, as this comes back, that keeps the thing open and safe, I'm guessing. One side has got in there, one side has not, or it's come beyond. And trying to pull the sunroof forward has made the situation worse. It's kind of exacerbated things. It's locked one side in while trying to drag the other, and as you imagine, trying to pull a carriage not completely plumb and square has upset it. So what I need to do is force this back just to prove my theory. You can see as that comes back, that kind of brings this tooth out, freeing that up, sending that ratchet in. Now, I would wager a bet that now that is free, this could be squared up a little, and then that could be pushed and pulled. I don't have the motor attached to this. I can't put slave power through it out here because I think being it's a multi-pin plug, it needs more than just 12 volts to it. It needs a condition to be met for it to work. So I'm having to figure this out completely mechanically without a motor on there with slave power. But what I'm going to do is set up a tripod, see if I can now move this at all by hand now that I've freed up this ratchet situation. If I can, the next plan will be to completely clean out all this old grease and all this old rubbish, clean it properly and put some new lubricant in there, run it through. Then I'll mount this back in the car, put some proper power to it, and we'll make sure that it works before putting that headliner back in. But I think we're getting somewhere. As I said, that's, I think, the solution. We'll find out shortly. Okay, so with that ratchet now cleared, both sides kind of looking similar, albeit this one much further forward, I'll see if I can manually push the roof into position. It's very hard when it's not mounted in the car, as you can probably imagine. Really don't want to force anything here and damage it. Okay, so this is proving to be a little bit tricky, getting these back into alignment. I need some kind of mechanical assistance, but because it is a glass sunroof with the plastics around, I'm really trying my best not to upset anything and break it, because then we'll be worse off than when we started. So I'm going to keep pecking away at this. I'll come back in a minute when I've got things moving. Right then, I've cleaned out those rails, I've flipped the sunroof over, and I've refitted the motor. So what I figured out is a way of testing this. As I said before, this motor needs multiple conditions to work, I think, rather than just a straightforward 12 volt feed. So what I've done is gone ahead and removed this chip and plug, which has revealed a simple 2-pin 12 volt system. So what I'm going to do is feed power to this motor now it's mounted, and hopefully operate the roof forward and backward, and at the same time I can re-lubricate it, but really it's just about testing to make sure everything's fine. So what I'm going to do now is flip this over, put you on the tripod, and I'll show you how it works. Okay, so as you've seen, now the roof is working perfectly, which is really good news. Bit of slave power to it has really made the difference. What I need to do though is clean up these rails fully. Now I can move everything around as I want it to. Clean them, use some proper grease that's going to be a bit more sympathetic over the next few years. Hopefully won't collect quite as much crud and cause the same issue again. Something else I want to do, on the cable system you've got these open-ended tails for the expansion of those two drive cables to and fro out of. What I want to do is just put a bit of penetrating fluid down these, and hopefully that will work its way through into the cables. I'll do it on both sides, and that will again help with the lubrication. Right, okay, sunroof is back together, all working. Now I need to refit it back into the Land Cruiser, which is going to be just as much of a fight, if not more of a fight, than it was bringing it out, so wish me luck. I'll try and film a bit, but if I don't, it's only because it's such a fiddly job and I can't be working with the camera at the same time as doing this, but I'll do what I can. Okay, so as predicted, that was a bit of a fight, but the headliner is now back in. I've got a couple of little fingerprints and marks to take off this light coloured headliner, because obviously fiddling around with it, you're going to make it marked, but nothing too bad. It can all be cleaned up. Point is, this sunroof is now totally functional. So now the sunroof is done, I've started having a look at this rear window, and as you can tell, I've got the glass down, so something's afoot. Well, what I found was, on removing this switch panel, it was actually unplugged. So when I plugged it back in, I put the window down, no problem. I'm now trying to put the window back up and it won't come. So there's clearly power to the motor, but I think a problem with the switch. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do yet, but if I can't figure out how to make the window go back up off the switch and sort this issue, I'm going to have to take the door card off, have a look at the motor and make sure everything is as it should be. Okay, so having had a look at the whole door, taking things apart, as you can see, I couldn't see anything obviously wrong. And ultimately what I've come up with is that it's a bad switch, because if I put slave power to the motor, now this is the plug for the motor, clearly I've unplugged it. If I put slave power to it, I can make the window operate. And I can bring it down again. And up again. So I'm thinking the problem is with my switch here. I'm assuming that because this is a faulty switch, that also stops the front master switch from working, because at the moment that is the issue we've got. All the other windows work from the control panel, but not this one, and each window works individually, but not this one. So I'm thinking this is a faulty switch. I need to figure out how to test this switch, and if I can't repair it, I need to work out if I can get a replacement from somewhere, but that is the line I'm currently working on. Okay, so we verified that that motor is good by putting slave power to it. So suspicion is a dodgy switch. To test that though, what I think I'm going to do is plug the motor back in, and let's just try this switch one more time. Down seems to work, but up does not. So if I take the switch from the and plug that in, will that give us control? If it does give us full control up and down, that would confirm my theory that that near side rear switch is dodgy. So this is the opposite switch, down, up, both working as they should. I just want to see if this window works from the driver's master control panel with that switch plugged in. Okay, that doesn't seem to work, but that could be because it needs a reset. So the way to do that on these vehicles is take the window halfway down, then all the way back up, and when it reaches the top, hold the window switch in up position for 5 or 10 seconds, keep it held there just until that time elapses, and that should hopefully reset the window, which means that from the driver's master control panel, the window should work. So let's give that a try and see if that reset has worked. Down, up. So that's perfect. So that does sort of confirm my theory. We've plugged in the offside rear window switch. The window works fine from the window itself and also from the master panel. So I can unplug that switch and put it back where it belongs, because we know that switch is good and we know it was doing a good job on this side. The issue we have, however, is the near side rear switch, when plugged into this proven to be functional window, will go down but not up. So what I think I need to do is take this switch apart and see if there's any obvious reason why the up functionality may not be working. It could be a dirty contact, it could be a dry soldered joint, it could be anything. So I'll see if that comes apart in any sense, and I'll show you what I find. Okay, so relatively interesting stuff. You saw me take that switch apart on time lapse. Now, how these switches work is when you rock the switch, there are 4 pins. When you pull it back, there are 2 pins at the back which push down, and again, when you push the switch forward, 2 pins push down. Now, they push down on this membrane which lives inside the switch cover, and there are push rods inside the switch, so 2 at the front, 2 at the back. So in our case, the window was going down, so when you push the switch forward, the 2 push rods are going down, pressing on this membrane. You may just be able to see there's one of these which has got a sort of shiny face and the others don't. That membrane then pushes down onto this board, onto these contacts. That tells the window to go down. That was all working fine, that's not the confusion. What wasn't happening that should have been happening, when you pull the switch up, the 2 rearmost push rods should be pushing on this membrane, pushing down onto this little board on top of this switch gear and telling the window it needs to go back up. That wasn't happening. So what I think is happening, nothing looks particularly dirty, but I think something must be failing making a full contact. So what I'm going to do is use some electrical cleaner just to clean up the face of this board, clean up all the contacts. I'm going to reinstall the push pins in this switch as they should be. Then I'll click it back together, but I won't put it back into the trim. I'll just have the switch, and then what I'll do, I'll take it over to the car, plug it in, and we'll see if that works. If it does, I'll show you. But essentially, I think it's probably just dirty contacts. I mean, that would be the best solution, but if that is the solution, it's one of those things where you could easily go out and spend 30, 40, 50 quid getting a new switch for this thing, but really, with a little bit of head scratching, you can work your way around most things. Okay, so pretty typically nothing is straightforward. I've had to strip the switch down. This is the switch that's causing us problems, and this is the switch from the other side, which is known to be good. So because I am nothing of an electronics expert, I'm having to kind of figure it out as I go. And a large part of that, for me at least, is continuity testing. So I've got my tester, and what I've done is looked at the good switch, and I've tested where all the different connections are together, where the continuity is, and I've been testing that against this dodgy switch. Now the only difference I can find between the two, now these should be exactly the same module, so they should test exactly the same in theory. The only difference I've found is these are the ports where these little push rods connect to make the window go up or down. Down is at the front, up is at the rear. The only difference I've found is there is a link between the front port, so this is a good switch again, between the front port and the rear port right, there's continuity. On the bad switch, there isn't. That's the only one that's different. That's the only connection I can find that's different. Now, from this pad to this post, if you follow the trace to this post here, there is continuity on the good switch. So we go to the bad switch, from that pad to that post, there is also continuity. Now, from the post on the good switch to this post, there's continuity, and of course from that post to that pad. Here we've got continuity from the pad to the post, but from that post back to this post there is nothing, and therefore of course nothing to that pad. So my theory is there's a break between this post and this post somewhere on the back side of this board. What I need to do is try and remove this board from this nylon housing and see what the back of this looks like, see what could be causing that break. I've tested various resistors and things, they're all checking out as they should, so it might be that I need to put a little fly wire in or something, but I'll figure it out as I go. But that is the update. There is a break somewhere on this board and I need to figure out how to repair it. Okay, so I've tried to separate this board from the nylon block. Can't be done, mainly because of these pins, and I don't want to damage anything more than I have to. So here's the plan. Because, how can I point this out best? Because this post should be speaking to this post and it's not, my intention is to run a surface mounted fly wire between the two posts, which means a little bit of micro soldering. Now, as I said just now, I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm really nothing of an electrician, let alone an auto electrician or a micro electrician, but I'm going to do my best. I know this probably isn't the best quality because I've got the camera zoomed in, but hopefully you'll get an idea of what I'm trying to do. I've got this very, very fine wire which is going to bridge the two posts, which should be speaking to each other and have continuity and don't. Once they do, I'm going to have to protect it with a small amount of hot glue or something like that so it can't short any other posts that shouldn't have. But as soon as that bridge is on there, I can plug this switch in again and test it and see if that does fix our issue. So I'm going to crack on, do this little tiny bit of soldering, and then we'll see if that fixes the issue I've got. Okay, I've just retested the switch with that little fly wire in it. Unfortunately, nothing's changed, which is really odd because I was almost certain that was going to be the problem. I've done a load more continuity testing. Ultimately, I think this is where not being an auto electrician sort of fails me a little bit. But the bottom line is I'm going to have to get it working, so I'm just going to order a new switch. I'm not going to order a new one, which is, I think, between £50 and £100, depending where you buy it. I'm going to go to a breaker and see if I can find a known good switch, which I'm hoping will be more like 10, 20, 30 pounds, something like that. So for now, that one's no good. I'm going to source a new switch and I'll come back to you when that switch is in stock and we fit that and make sure the window does work before this car gets viewed again. Okay, you're joining me a few days later now. I know I look a little bit different, I'm covered in dust. I will tell you that aside from the cars at the moment, I am renovating a house. So while I'm waiting for parts, I'm there working on the house, hence I am covered in dust. But anyway, the new switch has now arrived. I say new, as I mentioned briefly before, I didn't go for a brand new switch here. I went for one from a breaker's yard, a known good part. Now that is absolutely fine in my opinion. This is a proper genuine Toyota part, but I didn't have to pay between £50 and £100 for it. I paid more like £15 delivered for this switch. So let's plug this in quickly, see if it works. It should do, it's a known good part, but we'll check it anyway. If it does work, I'll put it back in that plastic trim and then we'll get the door rebuilt. So let's go and check this out now. Okay, so we're back at the door. Obviously the motor is plugged in, so let's put this new to me switch in here and see if it'll go down. That's fine. The reason it's not doing down on an auto 1 press is because the switch needs recalibrating. We'll go through that again when I've rebuilt the door, but let's more importantly see if it goes up, because if you remember, this is where we had the problem before. It would go down but not up. So up. Perfect. So what I need to do now is recalibrate the switch once I've rebuilt the door, and then we should be good to go. Okay, so with that sunroof fixed and that rear window now working again, this Land Cruiser can be sold. However, I can't sell it in this condition. It is absolutely minging at the moment. As mentioned before, that was from the test drive previously. So I'm going to get this thing all cleaned up, looking fresh, and hopefully find a buyer for it as soon as possible. Okay, all clean and looking much better. The sunroof is fixed and that rear window is now working properly, and the car is, in my opinion, looking absolutely fantastic. So all I really need now is someone who's serious to come and stand in front of it, and I'm sure they will have to have it because it's such a lovely example of what is a highly regarded old truck. Now, I had hoped this was going to be one of those Chop to the Top episodes where I sell the car before the end of the episode so I can tell you what it's sold for, and I can give you a bit of a hint as to what's coming next time. Sadly, that hasn't happened this time, mainly due to that sunroof letting me down on a viewing. But these things happen. It's not the end of the world. It's all fixed and it's ready to go now. But for that reason, the car didn't sell quite as quickly as I'd have hoped it would. But I'm sure as soon as someone serious comes and sees it, it will sell. And at that time, I will go out and buy something else, and I'll make a Chop to the Top episode on that. And at the start of that episode, I'll tell you what this car sold for, and we'll go through all the costs and how much it made, just like we did at the start of this episode on the Subaru Forester. But until that time, thank you ever so much for watching, and I will of course catch you on the next one. Cheers.